Hello. Welcome or welcome back. Cats. There's somewhere between 200 million to 1 billion of them in the world today. There's over 60 million of them in the United States alone. The fact is a lot of people love cats. The odds are most of you viewing or listening to this episode love cats. Anyway, I'm sure you know the proverb of cats having 9 lives. Well, if you go to my apparel website, justtextclothing.com, then you'll be introduced to another proverb stating that the cat is willing to risk 10 of its 9 lives just to get away from you. I don't think I need to go into more detail on what that proverb is saying. So in order to promote that dope quote T on my apparel site, I asked my AI friend to come up with some story ideas based off that quote, and with some editing and modifications from yours truly, I present to you, Cats of 9 Tails. A short story about a cat named Calico, her pirate friend named Captain Ravenshadow, and the troubles they find themselves in the high seas. And now without further ado.
Chapter 1, 9 Lives Left. Calico dug her claws into the wooden railing and arched her back as a sea breeze ruffled her orange tabby fur. From her perch aboard the Midnight Blade, she watched the merchant ship struggling to escape the relentless pursuit of the fearsome pirates. As the nimble feline gazed at the target vessel, she lifted a paw and licked casually at her toes as if bored by the routine chase. But her yellow eyes shone with anticipation. As ship's cat of the Midnight Blade, Calico took her duties of dispatching vermin, catching the occasional gull, and overseeing the superstitious crew quite seriously.
"They're hauling down the mizzen, Captain,"
called Jacques, the first mate.
"She's already given up."
"Excellent,"
replied Captain Ravenshadow from behind the ship's wheel. His red coat billowed dramatically in the wind.
"Ready the grappling hooks. Today's plunder won't escape us."
The grizzled crew cheered in reply. With a leap and a bound, Calico made her way up onto Ravenshadow's shoulders. The captain gave her a quick scratch behind her remaining ear, the right ear having been lost 2 lives ago, as the ship surged forward. In short order, the merchant vessel was boarded without resistance and valuables located and transferred to the Midnight Blade. It was a perfect raid for the pirates. As the crew returned and the ships parted ways, Calico watched proudly from her new perch atop a pile of treasure chests. Yes, life aboard as a pirate ship's cat suited Calico nicely. She had weathered many an adventure in her 9 lives already. But, she reflected idly, only one remained to risk now on behalf of her beloved, if unruly, crew and her bold captain who always treated her as the luckiest of comrades. Surely nothing and no one would part her from them now, Calico thought with a lazy yawn. As long as she had that one life left, the Midnight Blade could never falter. And this tabby would ensure that last life never ran out. For now, at least, the day's spoils promised a nap in the sunlight was her only concern. Chapter 2, The Rival Pirates. Calico awoke to shouts and clashes of steel ringing loudly across the deck of the Midnight Blade. She sprang up, fur on end, no longer drowsy in the slightest. The ship swayed violently as another vessel pulled alongside, firing cannons in a relentless barrage.
"To arms, ye scallywags!"
Captain Ravenshadow bellowed, drawing his sword with flair.
"It's Peg-Leg Pete and his mangy crew."
Calico's claws gripped the wooden deck tensely. Peg-Leg Pete was Ravenshadow's fiercest rival among the pirates that scourged these waters. Skirmishes between the 2 ships were frequent, but hardly welcome in her view. Still, the Midnight Blade had never yet fallen to another pirate's vessel. Crossing swords and exchanging volleys, the 2 crews clashed violently as the ships were lashed together. Calico kept clear of the main fighting, not keen to expend life number 9 on some foolish acrobatic maneuver today. As a wayward pistol shot splintered the crate near her, Calico decided below deck seemed the wisest course for now. She slipped through the forward hatch, sauntering past the rows of cannons as the artillery crews reloaded constantly. The echoing bangs were nearly deafening. Finding a quiet corner, Calico cleaned her face carefully as she waited for the battle to conclude. Surely Captain Ravenshadow would send these scoundrels packing shortly, as he had done countless times before. No mangy pirate crew could overwhelm her bold comrades this day. Nearly an hour passed before Calico detected a change in the sounds from on deck. The clanging swords and firearms had ceased. Curious, she eagerly bounded up the steps expecting cheers of victory. Instead, an eerie silence greeted her. Stepping onto the deck, Calico's hopeful smile vanished at once. The crew stood with heads bowed, several sporting fresh injuries. Peg-Leg Pete stood gloating by the ship's wheel, his filthy crew picking through the scattered treasure and supplies like vultures. Ravenshadow himself was nowhere to be seen on deck.
Well, look it here.
Pete growled with rotten grin as he spotted Calico's arrival.
If it ain't the captain's beloved pet. Ye best learn to serve new masters on this ship from now on, if ye want to keep that last life o' yours.
His crew laughed nastily as Calico retreated with haste, her mind racing. What fate had befallen her dear Captain Ravenshadow at the hands of these blackguards? And how would she and her remaining crew possibly endure their cruel dominance aboard the captured Midnight Blade? The outlook seemed grim indeed without Ravenshadow to lead the way forward. Their only hope now rested on cleverness, courage, and a scrappy orange tabby refusing to expend life number 9 short of saving them all. Chapter 3: The Impossible Mission. Calico kept to the shadows, slinking amongst barrels and under stairways as Peg-Leg Pete's men ransacked the Midnight Blade. Most were still topside, pillaging the ship's supplies and treasured possessions. Those scoundrels who came below deck paid little mind to one dispirited orange cat. Yet, despite their boisterous laughter at their easy conquest, Calico detected the pirates were growing somewhat uneasy. For the ship itself felt altered without Captain Ravenshadow at the helm. Minor mishaps plagued their efforts, as if the very boards rebelled at their presence. Rigging lines inexplicably became tangled. A powder keg tipped and ruined a store of firearms. The lingering crew of the Midnight Blade made no efforts to hide their snickers as misfortunes arose. Calico knew well the cause. These pirates were a superstitious lot, for all their swagger. The absence of the captain, and his prized tabby in particular, sat ill with them. Calico couldn't resist occasionally darting across their sightlines with an echoing hiss or yowl at opportune times to enhance their fears of lingering bad luck. Yet satisfying as it was to pester her captors, it brought Calico no closer to discovering what became of Captain Ravenshadow. None mentioned his fate, and inquiries only earned her snarling threats in return as boots and hooks were waved to shoo the bothersome cat away harshly. It was Jacques, the former first mate, who finally discreetly informed Calico of the situation 2 days after the attack. Hidden below decks in the canned goods cellar, he gestured her close and spoke in hushed tones.
The captain still lives, though in dire peril, my lady.
Jacques revealed.
Peg-Leg Pete took him captive. Means to ransom him back to us as leverage for control over these waters.
Calico listened intently, tail twitching as she learned her beloved captain remained alive, if imprisoned.
I'll be leading a boarding party at dusk 3 nights hence to rescue our captain.
Jacques continued.
But I'll be needin' a clever lookout to scout things out and locate precisely where that blackguard Pete is keepin' him hostage. Be our eyes and ears, sneak past their drunken guards if ye can.
Calico's fur bristled anxiously at the thought. To not only sneak aboard that wretched pirate vessel, but slink about utterly alone looking for the captain with only one life remaining? Madness! Surely sailing into battle would prove safer for her quickly dwindling stock of lives. Yet the thought of her dear Ravenshadow languishing in some cage or dreaded brig while scoundrels like Peg-leg Pete lorded about the ship made her blood boil. She owed it to herself and her crew to take this chance, no matter the risk. Back straightening with determination, Calico gave Jacques extended palm and affirming headbutt followed by several forceful licks. Yes, though failure likely meant the end of life number 9, she would accept this vital mission and its impossible odds. Gathering her cleverness and courage close, Calico vowed to locate and help rescue her cherished captain or perish in the attempt. No mangy parasite of a pirate would deny her the midnight blade and rule of the open waves. Chapter 4: Stowaway. Calico waited until full darkness had fallen before slinking up the mooring line linking the midnight blade to Peg-leg Pete's ship, the Barnacle. Mercifully, the swirling seas and cloudy skies concealed her approach across the rope. She refused to glance down at the churning black waves below that eagerly awaited any slips of her balance. Scrambling over the railing, Calico crouched behind a coil of thick hawser. No alarms or cries of discovery arose, much to her relief. She shook her damp paws briefly, then scanned her surroundings with care. The Barnacle appeared eerily similar in layout to her own ship, now usurped by these scoundrels. Dim lanterns swung from the masts overhead, casting long shadows. Drunken voices rang out from the forecastle where Pete's crew gamed with dice and cards, paying the lone watchman at the wheel little notice. The cool night breeze told Calico more storms were rolling in, the perfect cover for her clandestine efforts. Keeping behind cover, Calico crept towards the nearest hatch leading below decks. She would focus her search there first and likely places the captain could be imprisoned. A flicker of movement made her freeze as 2 rats emerged from the galley larder, carrying ears of corn nearly as big as themselves. The rodents scurried right past Calico without noticing the predator in their midst. She allowed herself a brief purr of amusement. Clearly, the Barnacle had need of her superior ratting skills. Another day, perhaps. Descending into the gloom of the hold, Calico took extra care upon the creaking steps. Her white paws seemed to glow faintly to her night-adjusted vision. Hopefully no sailors were still awake to spot them if her steps caused stray lantern beams to dance her direction. As the snores and mumbles of off-duty pirates reached her keen ears from nearby hammocks, she tread lightly indeed past their quarters. It was upon reaching the final level that Calico at last detected a faint groan of misery from behind a small weathered door. No hinges or handles were evident, but the installed beam and heavy lock signaled promise. Prisoners or precious cargo were undoubtedly secured within against thievery. Rising up on her hind legs, Calico peered through the barred window set at her eye level, hoping to spot her missing captain. The reek of mildew and stagnant seawater assaulted her nostrils. As her vision adjusted to the deeper darkness within, a feeble light suddenly bloomed from a small oil lantern lifted by its lone occupant. Calico met the weary but very welcome visage of Captain Ravenshadow staring back in disbelief. His left eye was marred by heavy bruising and a haggard beard now lined his gaunt face, but the captain had clearly not yielded 1 inch to his captors. Heart soaring in triumph, Calico yelled eagerly in joy through the cell door as she pawed frantically to reach her long-lost commander at last.
Calico.
Ravenshadow rasped in a strained tone of desperate hope himself.
Am I finally dying or delusional? Or have you truly found me at last?
Unable to properly embrace through the confines of his cell, Calico leaned fully against the rough door as she purred loudly against the gap beneath the locked portal. On the other side, she felt the weary captain likewise slump down against her in relieved contact and companionship. After days languishing in dreaded captivity, Captain Ravenshadow was located and no longer alone. Chapter 5: Captured. Calico's triumphant yell at locating her beloved captain was cut short by a rough hand suddenly grabbing the scruff of her neck from behind. In one harsh movement, she was lifted forcibly into the air up to stare directly into the rotten grin of Peg-Leg Pete himself leering at her with contempt.
Well, well. Look at what we got here.
Pete growled as Calico hissed and spat angrily.
Trying to steal away with my leverage for control, these waters, puss. You're both gonna regret that now.
Turning sharply, Pete used a ring of heavy keys at his belt to unlock the cell door and fling it wide. Before she could react, Calico found herself flying through the air directly into the tiny chamber alongside the battered Captain Ravenshadow. She hit the moldy floorboards hard as the door slammed shut behind her a moment later.
There you be, Ravenshadow. Found yourself a bit, old company, to share your accommodations.
Pete taunted from beyond the locked portal.
Maybe now you won't be causing me crew such bother without your precious pet to aid your escape plots.
With that and an ugly laugh, Peg-Leg's shuffling steps moved away. A beam of light briefly illuminated Ravensshadow's anguished face before the doorway was sealed fully, leaving the pair in darkness once more. As Calico struggled back to her feet, she heard the captain slump to the floor himself in despair.
Oh Calico, my loyal friend, what have I done?
Ravenshadow uttered weakly nearby, his voice thick with remorse in the blackness.
I should never have put such a dangerous task to you alone. Now you share in my wretched fate. Can you ever forgive me for this foolishness?
Calico's eyes slowly readjusted enough to make out his hunched form. Patting over softly, she gently headbutted and nudged against Ravenshadow until his hand came down to stroke her head affectionately. As she purred her absolution, the captain gradually collected himself. No, no, you've done nothing to earn my ire, Ravenshadow, Calico wished she could say. We will endure this together now and find our way free soon enough.
Did you enjoy this story like I did? If you're still listening at this point, then I'm assuming the answer is yes. Well, I have good news for you. This was only part 1 of the Cat of Nine Tails. It's going to be a while until part 2 is released because I need to figure out where I want to take the story. If you're listening to this well in the future, then you can watch and listen to part 2 by clicking the card on your screen. Also, remember to check out The Cat is Willing to Risk 10 of its 9 lives just to get away from UT at my apparel site, justtextclothing.com. Okay, that's it for me now. See you in the future.